My name is Soren Aldaco. I am a 23-year-old woman from Texas, born and raised in the suburbs, the urban sprawl between Dallas and Fort Worth, but now I live in Austin, where I just graduated with my bachelor's degree, and I now study how the internet is influencing identity formation. And thank you. With that, I speak on behalf of myself today as someone who began transitioning socially at age 11, was on the internet, chronically online, like a lot of people my age were and are. And that's where I was first, like I said, exposed to the idea that I could be born in the wrong body, and that surgically and medically altering my body might be a good fix for my mental health conditions or my discomfort generally with that body, which was changing, right? Which is pretty normal for puberty. But that was mostly a role play identity, something that I used as a framework for developing a sense of self until age 15, when I met my biological father for the first time. I went inpatient. I had a little bit of a mental break, as I'm sure many people would have, meeting their biological father through Facebook for the first time. And while inpatient, the doctor picked up on the fact that I bound my chest and I went by a different name than what was on my record. And he pushed me until I told him, finally, after he had kind of fish for the idea that, some people don't identify with their body parts down there, and, eventually pushed me until I came out as trans to him, and then called home and told my family that was the root cause of all my problem. No credence to the fact that I had just met my biological father, no credence to the fact that I had a strained relationship with my stepfather, who helped raise me, but who is pretty profoundly disabled. And so from there, I started to internalize that idea that medical transition might be a path forward for resolving this distress that seemed never ending. And so I began attending a support group in the DFW area. There were several support groups actually in that area run by the same organization, Transcendence International. And it was at that support group that I met a nurse practitioner who had a transgender adult child and was furnishing hormones to pretty much anyone who came and saw him. And after one appointment at age 17, without ever meeting my real parents or even verifying that the adults who took me were my parents, which they weren't, he prescribed me testosterone and an estrogen blocker, and anastrozole. He facilitated me to lie about my sex on my government documents, such as my license, and I could have gotten my birth certificate changed as well if I had wanted to. And referred me to specialists anytime I would have a complication pop up. If I had vaginal atrophy, it was the gynecologist who was really quick to offer me a hysterectomy. If it was, dizziness and headaches and joint pain, it was the rheumatologist or the neurologist or the cardiologist or the orthopedist. I saw all of those at age 16, 17, 18, 19. And so he too also used endocrine disorder not otherwise specified, I believe it was called, to get these covered by my private insurer. But worse than that medicalization, which happened right before the onset of COVID in January of 2020, led me to begin to explore in that pandemic lockdown the idea of amputating my breasts as a form of treatment for the stress and the distress that the hormones didn't actually absolve, right? Because they weren't actually treating so much as they were adding on to the list of problems I was already experiencing. And at that point, I had seen a therapist who had a trans ex-spouse, and she helped write a totally fraudulent letter. And by fraudulent, I mean full of things that were not true, such as my client has lived as a man for the last 12 years, which as someone who was born female and will die female, I had not. But that was especially untrue during COVID, right? When there was no opportunity for me to even go into the public to live life as a normal person or adult, let alone the opposite sex. So she ignored a history of sexual assault that I disclosed to her, and after I stopped seeing her, I ghosted her. She did not revoke that letter, but she did terminate my status as her client. From there, I saw the Crane Clinic in Austin, which I strongly advise being researched. They moved from California to Texas because of Texas, at least in my opinion, Texas's tort reform laws, which make it extremely difficult to sue them for medical malpractice. They told me that they could get my surgery covered in network despite being out of network, so they had like a 90% success rate. Told me alongside listing all the complications I could experience from the surgery that they had never really had any complications like that. And I would later find out after experiencing complications that was because because they ghosted clients who had complications. They told me nothing was wrong with me on 3 separate occasions until I ended up in the hospital. And when I asked just, what are you guys gonna do to prevent this from happening in the future? They stopped responding to me after trying to get me to sign a non-disparagement agreement and giving me $400, which I did not take because I wasn't gonna sign that NDA. So I think and I'll wrap it up here, I think the main through lines of my story were ideological ties, right? That center catered specifically to transgender patients, had a lot of really affirming imagery and people laughing and feeling good, kind of like those drug commercials you guys, I'm sure you've seen. There was no differential diagnosis, no exploration of the root cause or interest into why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And there seemed to be this kind of common thread with supporting the whole person rather than what their expertise was and what their specialty was as doctors, not activists. It was like putting diesel in a gas engine for me. I was never given the insight that I was altering a fundamental process in my body, which is my endocrine system. And although I was on 14 different medications when I detransitioned in 2022, I'm now on to for Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroid disorder that I think I may have obtained from the testosterone.
Soren, thank you. If I can ask, you mentioned what you're currently studying, and it does seem, as you continue research on this, the link between access to social media and a lot of the stories we're hearing and transitioning. Right? Are you seeing that as part of your research as well as you're going through that?
Yeah, I'm really interested in that. In particular, I think kids use frameworks to understand how to move through the world. That's why it's important they have parents who love them, right, to show them what kind of adult they could become. And when the internet is doing the parenting, which I don't think often is totally the fault of the parents, like you guys didn't grow up with that, right? You guys didn't see the consequences until our generation had already suffered them. I think it can be really easy to slip into online groups that tell you who you are instead of letting you explore it in an embodied way in the real world through all 5 of your senses and not just this audio visual matrix that is social media and the internet.
Great. Thank you.